We're in the third chapter of Daniel. Most of all of us, I'm sure, know this story as well as any, but it's a good reminder for us, especially in the day in which we're living. Jesus reminded his disciples in Matthew 10:22 that they would be hated of men, but those who endured to the end would be saved. John 15:18, Jesus reminded them that if the world hated them, it hated Jesus first. And here in chapter 3 of Daniel, we find these Old Testament believers facing a horrible death because of their obedience to God. And there's one thing that kind of struck me is in this day and time, and churches, and you especially watch on TV and some of the more quasi-liberal churches, everything's praise and worship, which is fine and dandy to me, to a point. I get a little perturbed when you stand up here and sing a verse of a song or a phrase of a song 15 times through. You know, sing it a couple times, sit down and get to preaching or something. I want to hear, that stuff's okay to a point. But, I really miss. I was in a meeting not too long ago, and it was a Baptist meeting, and had a lot of the more contemporary music. And it was okay to a point. But, with all the 200 and some people or 200, 300 people sitting there, I would love for them to break out into Jesus Saves or Amazing Grace or, can you imagine a congregation of people who love the Lord singing those old hymns of the faith? It just bless my soul. And I would love to have heard that. But we're living in a different day. I got the news for you, though. The gospel's still the same.
Amen. And
it ought to be the same. And as we attempt to lead people to Christ, we should never falsify what this life means. You are eternally saved. If God saved you, He's prepared you for heaven. He's taking you to heaven. That's your promise from God. But we should also help people to understand that as we living for Him here, and even though the Christian life is a wonderful gift from God, and the Christian life has many blessings, it does not mean that we will not face hardship. It does not mean that you may not face something that may bring a terror into your life, or tragedy, or pain, or a circumstance that might even jeopardize your safety or your very existence. We should be truthful with others that if you're going to turn to Christ, yes, He died for you, He rose from the dead for you, He's going to take you to heaven with Him. But Jesus said if they hated me, they're going to hate you, because you represent me, and we need to get to that. In America, we've been kind of spared throughout the years, except for the last 30 or so, or maybe a little more, but especially in the last 10 or 12 years, Christians have really been put upon, and people are facing hardships in ways we never thought we would ever have to face in this country. And we need to get prepared to say that who's on the Lord's side, and if you are, you need to get there and start preparing for those days. Unless Jesus comes, we're all going to face some real hardship in various ways, and we need to get prepared for that.
Yes.
Because I don't think many of us are. So we should be truthful with those who want to come to Christ, and we should encourage them, but that living and obeying God in this life may bring hatred. It will be, according to Jesus, bring hatred to of the world for who you stand for and what you stand for. And so with that said, we're going to look at a couple verses throughout chapter 3 here. And of course, you know what I'm going to be talking about. Good old Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego eventually here, and what they went through. Not unlike what many are going through today in the world in which we're living. In chapter 3 and verse 1, Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold, whose height was 80 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. The text here informs us that the king made a statue of himself, 90 feet tall, about 9 feet wide, set it up out there where everybody could see it. And it's kind of interesting because we haven't gone through chapter 2 yet, and we may get back to that, but in chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. He couldn't understand his dream. So he called his wise men and his sorcerers and soothsayers and all these people, and they came and they couldn't interpret the dream either. And finally, when it boils down, somebody remembered Daniel, and Daniel came over and said, yes, I can tell you, but I want you to know right now, it's not me telling you. If any interpretation comes from this dream, it's going to be the God of heaven that's going to give it to you. It's his and his alone. I might be the interpreter, but it's God that does it. And Daniel did the right thing. There are so many today, if you watch on TV, and some of these guys who get on there, everything's them. I've got this, I've got that. Let me tell you something, I'm nothing. I don't got nothing in this world that's any good for you, except for one thing, and that's the gospel of Jesus Christ. And he does the preaching. I might be the mouthpiece, and I do the best I can. He's not working with, the brightest bulb in the pack, but when he came in, he became the light.
Man.
And so he can use me. Justin and I were talking about an issue yesterday, and somebody was saying something to him, and the person, you just wouldn't think that this person would be what God would use. But I'm going to tell you something. I said, well, let me tell you, God used Balaam's donkey, and God can make the rocks cry out, so God can use anything he wants to.
Amen.
That's up to God. And God can use me. And I'm grateful for that. So just bear in mind, as you're trying to listen to this a little old bald-headed preacher boy, you just try to hear the voice and the word of God through it, and apply it to your hearts in any way that God would have you to do that. So Nebuchadnezzar is going to build him a great big statue. He's going to build him a great big edifice that he wants people to come and bow to. And the reason in chapter 2, after Daniel came and interpreted the dream for him, that he declared that the God of the Hebrews was a good God, and that nobody should speak against God, and everything seemed to be hunky-dory. He even elevated Daniel to the chief administrator, literally the president of the province of Babylon. And then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were the administrators for that. Well, actually Daniel was over the whole nation, but these guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were the administrators of the province of Babylon. And so they had to know what was going on. They understood things were happening. On down in chapter 3, and between verses 1 and 7, I'll read verse 2 here. It says, then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs. Sheriffs were in the Old Testament, literally of the law enforcement. Sheriffs and the rulers of the provinces to come and dedicate to the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And then in verse 3, he redoes all that again. All those people came because he commanded them. Then in verse 4, and an herald, somebody who goes around proclaiming, said aloud, or cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, the dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. And whoso falls not down worshipeth the same hour. If you don't worship, you'll be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, the kinds of music, all the people of the nations, the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image of Nebuchadnezzar the king, which he had set up. So basically what he's saying is there's going to be music. And when all you gather together, all you princes, all you, literally it was his civic authority throughout the whole nation. He called everybody that had any kind of power, governors, anybody. You come and you're going to bow down. When the music starts, you bow. And if you don't bow, there's going to be a great fiery furnace. I've tried to look up that fiery furnace. Why it was there at that particular time, if it was something made for that particular reason, I don't know. It was something that was down in the ground. They dug a pit somehow, and whether it was made to burn stuff or for fuel, who knows. But it was there, and it was something that Nebuchadnezzar the king could go and look in, as we'll find out later. But it was a big old fiery furnace. I think it was there for effect. I think that once that the king had declared that, and that all these people, and they kind of fired that little thing up, and they could hear the rumbling and the fire, and they were probably within earshot of that. And when he said, if you don't bow, there's where you're going, it got their attention. And when people's lives are at stake, you kind of get them to do what you want. So he was according to history, he was a master tactician anyway. He knew how to get people to do what he wanted them to do. And so that's what he said. They're going to bow to me. The thing that strikes me funny about all of this is that, remember when Daniel in chapter 2 had declared the image of the dream and told him what he wanted? According to history and the theologian, it was 16 years earlier. 16 years had passed from chapter 2 to chapter 3. And the Chaldeans, the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel had all been working for the king. Daniel wasn't here at this time. There's nothing mentioned about Daniel personally being at this event. He was probably out on some state business. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were there. And the Chaldeans had 16 years to stew over the fact that Daniel and the 3 Hebrew children Daniel had given the revelation from God. And it made the other soothsayers and all these other guys look bad before the king. They didn't like it then. And it took 16 years and they still didn't like it. And folks, let me tell you something. I've been in churches where when I was pastoring in New Mexico, much larger church, there were people who've been in that church for years that have been stewing over stuff and just waiting for an opportunity to get up and say something, you know. And the devil's patient a lot of the time. He'll wait and he'll just let you stew, and then when something comes along, all of a sudden here we go, you know. But anyway, these guys had looked bad, and they were just waiting for a time that they could blame or bring some kind of accusation against these guys who had taken their place, who God had raised up, who they were aliens, they were Jews in the Chaldean culture, they were Jews that Nebuchadnezzar had conquered, and they were put in places of great authority. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they had to understand what was going on. They probably signed off on all the materials that were put together to build this thing.